We have a lot of different style videos on our CJ channel, but a lot of the content we produce here is geared towards showing you how to work on your Mustang. Whether it's a classic Mustang or a modern Mustang, restoration work or performance work, we're really proud of our library of do-it-yourself videos. One thing we don't really talk about though is a lot of mistakes that first-time do-it-yourself mechanics might make. Now, if you're just getting started in doing this, you're just learning your way through your car, there are some mistakes you're gonna make. There's mistakes I make every day still in the studio. My videographers do a great job of editing all those out. But mistakes are going to be made. So what we're gonna do today is talk about 10 common mistakes that a do-it-yourself mechanic might make at home, so maybe you can recognize them and not make them yourself. Now, these are in no particular order, but number one on my list is going to be misuse or abuse of hardware. Now, that can happen in a lot of different ways, but if you do it bad enough, you're going to need one of these to fix the threads or fix the bolt itself. Now, what happens with a lot of people is they don't maybe have the right size socket, or it doesn't feel quite right, and they strip the bolt. They round that head off, which is going to make it really, really difficult to get it off. Another thing is Phillips head screws. You have the wrong screw head, and you end up damaging it because the screwdriver is the wrong size, and if you strip out a Phillips head screw, it's going to be very, very difficult to get it out. Another thing is going to be cross-threading bolts. If you're installing something and the bolt just doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. And you have to do this a bunch of times, and you'll get a feel for it eventually, and I've still done it myself. But if you start to feel the bolts not going in right, it's probably cross-threading, which means you're going to damage those threads. You could damage the bolt. You got to break out the kit to fix it. So that's something to be very, very careful of. If the wrench feels like it's not quite fitting that nut or bolt, it's probably the wrong size. That Phillips head screwdriver is not fitting the screw just properly, find the right size Phillips head screwdriver so you don't damage the screw. Not damaging bolts, not cross-threading bolts, being far more careful with the hardware will lead for a much, much easier installation and a lot less headaches when doing the job. Number two on my list is going to be overbuying tools, buying more expensive tools than you really need. If you're only wrenching on your car a couple weekends a year or whatever, you don't need to run down to the local Snap-on, Matco, whatever. It's like, this stuff's great. And if you use it all the time, it's worthwhile to make this investment. They say buy once, cry once. But if you're doing this stuff at home, you don't need the best tools. Buy yourself some decent tools. Get stuff at your local hardware store or whatever, and use those tools. And if you start breaking something regularly, like your ratchet keeps snapping, okay, then invest the money in a better, higher quality ratchet. But again, you don't have to run out and buy the most expensive tools. You're better off buying a larger set of tools than buying a lot of smaller, higher end tools. That way you've got more tools for the job and far better chance of having the right tool, which will make the job a lot easier. Number three on my list, and this actually kind of ties into number one and number two, is stay away from gimmicky tools. And something like an adjustable wrench isn't really a gimmicky tool, but again, this has a certain use, but you're not going to use this very often. You don't want to turn a lot of nuts and a lot of bolts with an adjustable wrench. You don't want one of those one-size-fits-all wrenches with a little spacer adapter in there. Stuff like that is going to lead to damaging bolts, or worst case, it's going to actually snap and break when you're trying to use it. There's those one-size-fit-all sockets and those screwdrivers with all the tips built into the frame, and it's like a rapid-fire. Stay away from gimmicky tools. Stick to the basics. Good set of screwdrivers, good set of ratchets, good set of wrenches. Get a good set of basic tools and stay away from those gimmicky tools because they're either going to damage what you're working on, or you're going to break the tool and even possibly hurt yourself. Now, number four on my list is going to be ignoring the torque specs. When we do our videos here, we try to provide torque specs. We don't always get it right, and we do try to make sure we're doing more and more of that, especially if they're supplied by the manufacturer. But read the torque specs and use them. Get yourself a good torque wrench. We've all heard the, how many ugga-duggas to tighten something. Yeah, for certain things, you're getting okay with that. But today's Mustangs, today's vehicles with a lot of the torque to yield bolts and stuff, it's very important that you use the torque specs. You don't need the most expensive torque wrench, but get yourself a decent one and make sure if the torque spec is provided by the manufacturer, that means it's probably pretty important and you should definitely use it. Number five on my list is going to be misuse of fluids. Now, there's a lot of different things this is going to fall into, whether it comes down to using the right fluid for your transmission, the right fluid for power steering, the right fluid for your coolant system. Make sure you have the correct fluid. And we're using special things like grease, anti-seize, thread lock, whatever. Make sure you're using the right stuff and make sure you use the right amounts. I know sometimes the right amount and the right stuff can be difficult to figure out, but if the manufacturer says use the blue Loctite, don't use the red. And again, you don't have to soak the bolt Loctite. Blue is designed to hold it in place, but gives you the possibility if you want to take it off later, you more than likely going to be able to, unless you absolutely soak it with Loctite. Red is pretty permanent. I mean, you can get red off, but more than likely you can do some damage because red is not meant to come off very easily. So again, if you're using that, don't soak it. Anti-seize, don't be afraid to use it. You know, you're gonna get this stuff all over your hands when you use it. You've seen us do it here. But again, if it calls for anti-seize, make sure you use it. And don't be afraid to use a decent amount. Again, it doesn't have to be soaked in it, but use a reasonable amount to make sure the job's done properly. Same with grease, use the right kind of grease. Gasket maker, use the right kind of gasket maker and use a right amount. But watch professionals, watch the amounts they use and learn from them. And again, make sure you use the fluids properly, work out for a much better installation. Number 6 on my list, disconnect the battery. If you're working on electrical stuff, 12 volts doesn't seem like a lot. It's gonna give you a good shock. It's not gonna kill you, but you can damage other things. When you have things disconnected or wires laying around, they touch something, it can arc, it can cause problems, especially in your modern cars. They have so many computers in them that the wrong wire touching the wrong surface can short out an entire computer system and cost you thousands of dollars. So if you're working on something electrical, you're unplugging lights, harnesses, whatever, first thing you wanna do, disconnect your battery. Next on my list is gonna be leaving open areas of your engine, transmission, or whatever you're working on exposed. If you have the intake manifold off your car and you're working on injectors or fuel rails or whatever, take some tape, cover up that intake. The last thing you want to do is drop even a small piece of plastic down inside your engine. You're gonna damage the engine, you can hurt it. I've seen $10,000 race engines get destroyed by a small little piece of metal that fell in the intake manifold that nobody noticed. If you have a cap off your radiator, a cap off anything, the engine open in any way, shape, or form, if there's an opening, cover it up with some tape. Tape is cheap and a lot easier than trying to get that stuff out of your engine or transmission. Number 9 on my list is actually something I personally have struggled with for years, and that's if something is in the way, simply move it. If you're trying to work on part of the engine and the power steering pump's in the way, or there's a wiring harness in the way, or whatever's in the way, instead of trying to work around it and use smaller tools and swivels and all these adapters, simply move it. The more space you have to work, the better of an install you're gonna be, and the better you can get to the bolts and not damage stuff. When you're trying to work around the parts that's in the way, you're literally just asking for problems. You're a better chance of damaging a bolt, cross-threading a bolt, causing something that's gonna make a lot more work in the long run. So if you're working on something and there's another piece of the car that happens to be in the way, like your exhaust runs under your fuel pump, take the exhaust off, give yourself better access. Again, it'll make for a much easier installation. Number 10 on my list, and this is gonna be a very general statement, is don't get in over your head. Don't aim too high when you're just getting started, and have patience and understand this is a learning process. Now, if you've never installed a cold air intake, you probably don't wanna try to do a supercharger on your own. So start with the small installations and work your way up. Now, I know you watch YouTube and guys like me make it look easy. We have editors, we make mistakes, we goof up stuff all the time, but our finished video, we know you guys don't wanna see the mistakes, you wanna see how to do something, and we show you that. But again, watch the videos and get an idea what you're capable of doing, but just don't overestimate it. The worst thing you can do is get into an install, you're way over your head, you can't do it yourself, it's just gonna make you feel bad about what you're doing, it's gonna make you not wanna do it again, it's gonna make it not be any fun. And if you're gonna do this, I'm gonna tell you right now, there'll be plenty of installs that aren't fun, but that feeling of accomplishment is definitely worth it in the end. So no matter what you're doing, what you're working on, make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew, so this becomes a fun hobby and doesn't stress you out.